Candice first saw him in her dreams. He was always there, lurking in the shadows at the periphery of her mind. A tall, pale man with icy blue eyes that seemed to pierce through her, wearing a dark trench coat that flared slightly at his ankles when he moved. His presence was suffocating, his intentions unmistakable. Every night, the dreams unfolded the same way. Candice would find herself in an unfamiliar place, a dimly lit parking lot, a desolate forest, or the echoing corridors of an abandoned building. And the man would be there, watching. When she ran, he followed. When she screamed, the sound seemed swallowed by the air. And when he finally caught her, she always woke up. At first, Candice dismissed the nightmare as stress-induced. Her demanding job at the local news station often left her frazzled, and she'd recently gone through a messy breakup. But as the nights went on, the dreams grew more vivid. She could feel the chill of the air, smell the faint tang of mildew in the places he pursued her, and even feel the bruising grip of his hands when he finally reached her. She began dreading sleep. One night, she jolted awake at 3:12 a.m., her heart racing. The dream had been more intense than ever. She could still feel his cold breath on her neck and the weight of his hand on her shoulder. As she sat in the darkness of her bedroom, trying to calm her breathing, she glanced toward the window and froze. For a split second, she thought she saw a figure standing across the street beneath the flickering street lamp. A tall man in a trench coat. Her heart seized, but when she blinked, he was gone. "It's just your imagination," she whispered to herself. "The dreams are messing with your head." But the next morning, as she sipped her coffee and flipped through her emails, she caught sight of something in the reflection of her laptop screen. A man standing on the sidewalk outside her apartment. He wasn't moving, just staring up at her window. Her coffee cup slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. But when she spun around to look out the window directly, the sidewalk was empty. By the end of the week, the sightings became more frequent. At the grocery store, she saw him at the end of an aisle, his piercing blue eyes locked on hers. In the parking lot at work, she spotted him leaning against a car, watching her as she hurried to her own. Even in broad daylight, she could feel his presence, but no one else seemed to notice him. "You're overworked," her friend Sophie said over lunch one afternoon. "Maybe you should take a few days off. Go somewhere relaxing." Candice nodded, but didn't respond. She didn't have the energy to explain how real it felt, how the lines between her dreams and reality were beginning to blur. That night, she locked every door and window in her apartment and double-checked them twice before going to bed. But sleep offered no refuge. The dream began as usual, with Candice wandering a darkened street. The man was there, his silhouette illuminated by a streetlight. This time, though, he spoke. "You can't run forever," he said, his voice low and cold. She woke up screaming, her neck drenched in sweat. When she looked at the clock, it was 3:12 a.m., the exact time she'd woken up every night that week. But this time, something was different. She heard a faint scraping noise coming from her living room. Her stomach dropped. Trembling, she reached for her phone and crept out of bed. The noise grew louder as she approached the living room. It sounded like metal against glass. She hesitated before turning the corner, her breath hitching in her throat. The sliding door to her balcony was open. Her hands shook as she clutched her phone, ready to call 911. She stepped closer, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. A chill breeze swept through the room, carrying with it the faint scent of damp earth. And then she saw him, standing in the doorway, his trench coat billowing slightly in the wind. His blue eyes gleamed in the darkness, and his eyes curled into a thin smile. "Hello, Candice," he said. The phone slipped from her hand as the man stepped forward, closing the distance between them. She stumbled backward, her mind screaming for her to run, but her legs felt rooted to the floor. "You've been running long enough," he said, his voice impossibly calm. "It's time to finish this." Candice finally found her voice and screamed, her desperation echoing through the apartment. But this time, there was no waking up. This time, the nightmare was real.